Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Ziggy's Rants. And today I've got David Griffiths with us from the Majority Show. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and make some sense of the last 48 hours or so. We'll go through what's happened, today's events, and then we'll try and find out what's going to happen or what we think is going to happen next week. So We'll start off, David. We'll start from the beginning. They had an extraordinary meeting with the cabinet where Hamza basically told the Greens to do one, get lost, kicked them out of the Butte House Agreement.
Yeah, exactly. And to take it a little step further back, if we go back to Tuesday, Hamza was busy telling the world that the Butte House Agreement with the Greens was worth its weight in gold and had achieved so much, and it was absolutely the right thing, and he would stick with it. The next day, Wednesday, it appears he received a visitation from Stephen Flynn, after following which we started seeing leaks on social media and in the press to say that it looks like Hamza is going to pull the plug on the Butte House Agreement. 8:30 the next morning, yesterday morning, he calls in Paddy and Big Lorna, and within minutes they left the building, and of course they didn't even have use of their parliamentary cars any longer, or their governmental ministerial cars. They had to walk. So it was all quite
saving the environment, David. They were saving the environment.
Well, indeed, yeah. I mean, so to the bitter end, they are believers in the low emissions cause. So God bless them for that. So quite incredible. And then he had to give the news to the waiting world, which he did, and he said that it had the House Agreement. He went on to say how wonderful it had been, but it had served its purpose, as he told everybody. And then within minutes, all of the other parties started heaping ridicule on it, as did the interviewers, in fairness. And then we went into First Minister's questions. Vote of no confidence was announced, and then you saw what happened for the rest of yesterday. All of the parties said, yep, we're back in the vote of no confidence, even the Greens. You can see the colour visibly draining from Hamza's face. You know, as somebody rightly said, yesterday Hamza looked a little bit white.
Well, yes, I've seen quite a few of the jokes that's gone around, but he had looked, and I think we'd mentioned it a few times, he had looked really out of sorts and out of, he looked stressed out to the point people were starting to get quite worried about him, his mental state. So maybe he knew what, I think he'd had. And as you said, Stephen Flynn had mentioned it, but I think he'd had quite a bit of, we'd heard quite a bit from the backbenches, from Fergus Ewing, from Kate Forbes, and others, that they were starting to get restless with this, with the Greens and with the Butte House Agreement.
Yeah, I think a lot of the fellow MSPs, the way I read it, Mark, was I think they probably reached out to Flynn to say, look, you got to help us here, because this guy really.
Do you think he got? Do you think he got an ultimatum?
I'm pretty certain something like that. I would imagine. I've been told for months. I mean, you know, I used to get a lot of info from people close to the SNP, and I've been told some time ago that the guys in Westminster think that the bulk of the MSPs, the SNP MSPs in Holyrood, are complete idiots. And they can see the guys in Westminster, the SNP guys in Westminster, have got a shorter political lifespan, obviously, because their parliamentary term is only going to be another, 8 months. It can't be any more than 8 months, and then they've got to go. We know that as things stand in the polls, they're looking like they're going to go. A lot of them are going to lose their seats. A lot of them, maybe as much as 30, possibly even more. But the MSPs in Holyrood, they know that the same thing's in the post for them, albeit it might be a little bit later. So I think there was great concern at the Green MSPs, and particularly the Green Minister's response to the Cass report. I think that caused great concern among some of the more traditional, shall we say, SNP MSPs. I suspect they reached out to Flynn. I suspect Flynn came up and said, you've got to stop this. You can't back these people anymore. They are electoral liabilities, and that's exactly what you're fast becoming. So you're going to have to do something. And of course, lo and behold, within hours, he got a complete 180 and changed his mind on what he was going to do with the Greens and the agreement. Yeah, and he didn't just reach that conclusion out of thin air. Clearly not. He's not the kind of guy to do that within 48 hours of saying how marvellous everything is, because he's the sort of guy who will wait to the bitter end and cling on for dear life, no matter how bleak the situation is that's facing him, as he's doing right now. So, yeah, I suspect he was told very clearly, no, you can't go on like this.
So we then had the Conservative Douglas Ross announcing a vote of no confidence.
Yep.
Not in the government, in Humza.
That's right.
Now, there was a lot of misinformation or not understanding, and I include myself in this, David. I completely agree. Include myself in this. I didn't realise myself until I was told that this is not a binding vote.
Yeah,
it's on the individual rather than the government.
That's correct. It's not obligatory for someone in Hamza's position to resign as a matter of course. If the vote goes against him, of course, he would have zero credibility if he tried to stay on. None at all.
The pressure would be on to resign.
Exactly, but and as we know that the machinations of the Hollywood government, the Hollywood Parliament, are quite strange. In as much as even if an MSP is found guilty of something outrageous, there doesn't seem to be any equivalent of gross misconduct wherein you can chuck him out, and that's why Derek Mackay stayed on the payroll long after sex pesting a 16-year-old boy. Ridiculous, because they couldn't just terminate his time in charge. Similarly, there are no hard and fast rules to say, oh, you've lost a vote, no confidence, right? That's it. You've got to call an election right now. Not the case. Had it been a vote of no confidence in the government, and had that succeeded, then that would be a different thing. But all it really means is, if there is to be a vote of no confidence in Hamza, and if he loses it, say loses it by 2 votes, it would be expected that he would resign that day, or at least give his notice that he would be resigning at the conclusion of a leadership election, because he clearly couldn't go on. But it wouldn't bring the government down, and it wouldn't prompt an election.
From what I was taught, there was a lot of talk about, well, Douglas Ross has messed up here. He's put in the wrong kind of vote of no confidence.
Yeah.
But from what I was told by message, was that no, this was on purpose, because it wasn't. The Conservatives knew that a vote on the government would not succeed.
Exactly, that's true. I'm convinced. I'm quite sure you're right there, Mark. Because
it was to embarrass Humza and embarrass the SNP and put pressure on. But I do not. But from what we've heard today, Labour are going to put in a vote of no confidence in the government.
Yes,
that's extra pressure being applied by Labour as well.
Yeah, that's true. And the difference being now, if the vote of no confidence in the government goes ahead, and the Greens have not yet said we won't back this, they've said they would wait and see what happens with the government next week. So they could back it, because they are mightily angry at being dumped so openly and so blatantly. So it's a possibility that they'll back it. You would imagine that the Labour Party would be, all their MSPs would be whipped to back it. One would imagine also that the Lib Dems and Conservatives would go with that, because they don't have a problem aligning themselves with Labour movements or amendments, whereas it's Labour that has the problem aligning itself with the Conservatives, obviously, in Hollywood, as we know. So yeah, there's every chance that it could succeed. It's possible. If it did succeed, then there would have to be a new First Minister, which would mean either, what I guess would happen is Douglas Ross would be proposed, and of course the SNP wouldn't have that. Sarwar would be proposed, the SNP wouldn't have that either. I don't know if they'd even bother proposing Cole Hamilton, etc., etc. It would just be a little bit.
28 days, don't they? They've got
exactly 28 days. You've got 28 days effectively to propose and have a new First Minister accepted. Realistically, it wouldn't happen, and so what would almost certainly follow would be an immediate notification that there would be an election. So we would move towards an election, which would have to be called within 28 days, I guess, and held sometime thereafter. So, yeah.
Do you think because this, to me, and I don't have any information on this whatsoever, but do you think this is a coordinated attack by the Conservatives and Labour? One puts in one against Humza, and then the other follows it quickly with a vote on the government. Do you think it could have been backdoor deals to put extreme pressure on the government to get an election? Do you think that could have been the way this has gone? Because it sounds pretty coordinated in my...
It does look that way, doesn't it? They've kind of taken turns to have a go and to have another thrust, then the other one takes a thrust. So it's possible. I'm told that there is very little cooperation between the Labour and Conservative parties, although I am told that there is some discussion, particularly at constituency level. So there is some discourse between them, you know, and I've been in Holyrood and I've seen SNP MSPs and Conservative MSPs talking very openly and very pleasantly. So yeah, there is some discussion at that level. As for the parties themselves, well, we know that the Labour Party, Scottish Labour, is terrified of being seen to be doing anything with the Conservatives, and that's always been the case since 2014. So I would say it's unlikely that it was too coordinated, but I think what's just as likely is the two parties are probably thinking, right, okay, they've done this, how can we top that? I know, we'll put in another thing. So it could be a little bit of that they're trying to outdo each other. But certainly there'll be some, there'll be an awareness in both large parties of what the other large anti-nationalist party is doing. And yeah, there's possibly an element of synchronization or coordination there. Yeah, and why not? Good, all very well if there is.
I think it's refreshing if it is. It's refreshing that they're actually taking on the SNP now. They're saying, we know you're weak.
Yeah,
coming after you.
Yes,
and it's about time they start. Even if it fails, it's about time it started. Now let's get to. Well, last night there was all the rumours came out, and I don't think I've ever seen so many journalists come out making statements.
Yeah.
That Humza was going to resign today, and it was because he was getting pressure from the party and the party elders to resign, and they were trying to convince him to resign.
Yeah, I think that's what we saw to an unbelievable extent last night. We saw people saying openly, even the National said that he's cooked. That's what they said. They had their guy, I think his name's Hamish Morrison, very, very pro-independence guy, said, oh, and he's finished. Unbelievable. And you saw a lot of very reputable pro-UK journalists, if you like, in the Herald and the Times saying, really, this guy's, it's only a matter of time. We then saw Murdo saying he's going to resign tomorrow and Neil Gray's going to step in. And Murdo then doubled down on that. And I remember thinking, you're taking a bit of a chance there, Murdo Powell, because unless your info is very, very good, I would not be saying it's going to happen. What you normally say is, there's a rumour that this might happen, but he went right for it. No, this is going to happen.
Pressure. Do you think that I'm going to start adding fuel to the fire?
Exactly. And I'm certain that there was an element of that. I'm pretty certain also, I tweeted this last night, you remember in 1990, Heseltine challenged Thatcher. They had a runoff, and she finished 4 votes short of the 2/3 or whatever it was that she needed in order to finish the contest in the first vote. So, which meant I had to go to a second vote. And she was in Paris, as you might remember. She then came back, and all of our ministers trooped in one after the other to say, listen, Mrs. T, I'm terribly sorry, and I know you're not going to want to hear this, but we just don't think you've got the numbers, and I'm afraid you're going to have to step down. So they effectively stabbed her in the front, never mind the back. That's why she stepped down, because she realised she didn't have the confidence of these guys any longer. And it looked for a long time last night that the very same thing was happening with Hamza, because we know he's an electoral liability. There was another by-election loss last night, albeit it was in Arbroath, albeit it was notionally a gain from the independents, but had it only been 1 seat at the last election, the SNP would have won it. So effectively, the SNP is 1 down. It's a 12th consecutive election since Hamza was appointed party leader. The SNP's failed to win. And he
SNP went completely.
Exactly, it fell by, I can't remember, 16% or something. People aren't voting. And the interesting thing about that by-election last night, the total votes for the pro-UK parties was I think, 67.5%. And you had the SNP in 26 and the Greens in about 7. So that's 2/3, 67-33 in favour of pro-UK parties. It's just, the SNP is in free fall, in absolute free fall right now. Their vote is falling off a cliff. And there's nothing that Hamza can do to arrest it. Nothing. He's just not an electoral asset at all. So
we get to the vote now. Yeah. The numbers, as what I've seen, is there's 63 SNP MSPs.
That's right.
And then there's Ash Reagan.
Yep.
From Alba. So that's 64.
Yep.
With Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dems, that's 64. As well.
That's
so
right.
If everybody votes, and if everybody votes the way it's expected, it will then go to the presiding officer, who will do the status quo.
That's correct.
She'll vote for Humza.
That's it. So the numbers, just to complete the numbers: Conservatives on 32, Labour 21, Lib Dems 4, I think it is. Is it 4?
Yeah.
I think it is, yeah. And then you've got which makes 57. Then you've got this unexpected group of 7 Green MSPs, 7 of the 8, of course, the 8th being Alison Johnson, the presiding officer, which makes 64. So it's either going to be with Ash Reagan is either going to make it 64 all or 65-33, or else she might abstain. Who knows? But really interesting, if it is 64 all, tradition dictates that the presiding officer, as you say, will vote with the status quo, which means that a Green MSP will vote against her party with the party, with the SNP. Quite bizarre, really. I mean, talk about a Pyrrhic victory. But
do you think everyone will vote?
I've got a suspicion. I've been very reluctant to say this, but I'll say it now. I suspect somebody like, if it looks like Ash Reagan might not vote for it, I suspect somebody like Monica Lennon or somebody like that might say, nah, I don't really want to do this. I've just got that suspicion, because I don't think there's unanimous appetite among all of the MSPs to see Hamza falling right now. I think somebody might weaken. I might be wrong. That's pure speculation. I don't know, of course, but it's just, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody just does something.
Yeah. The way I see it, in my view, I think he has to win it outright.
Yeah.
If it's 64-64,
yeah,
I think it gives a great opportunity for the Douglas Ross and the Labour and us to every week say to him, every policy he comes up with, and every time he speaks in Parliament, they can just turn around and say, you don't have the backing of this Parliament.
Exactly.
What you're doing, you don't have the backing. Even if it's 64-64 and the presiding officer bails him out, he still doesn't have to. So he has to, in my view, I think he has to he has to win outright. Even if it's by 1 vote, he has to win outright.
Yeah. I mean, if it went to the presiding officer who's only voting for him because tradition dictates that's what she must do, that's not a win at all.
No.
That's the most hollow victory you can imagine. But he's come out swinging today, as we know.
Yeah,
you'll have seen saying, "Oh no, I'm fighting on," and some of the interviews he's been given are just bizarre. I mean, he's coming out smiling, saying, "Well, I'm going to win." How are you going to win? Because I'm going to win. Right, okay, great. Well, good luck with that. So yeah, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But that would be my expectation. I think it will either go quite a narrow victory one way or the other. At the moment, it's hard to say. A lot depends on how his own MSPs feel about it all, because there might be at least one of them who doesn't fancy him staying on. Who knows? Remember, it doesn't necessarily mean there will be an election, so maybe they will be feeling emboldened. Because a lot of people are saying, why would Ash Reagan vote for Hamza to lose his job? Because that, if it goes to she's where's her seat against Edinburgh East, isn't it? And Alba aren't even registering on the opinion polls there, so she would unquestionably lose her seat. But as we've said, the fact that he leaves doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be an election. So she might. It'd be interesting to see what you think about where Ash Regan is sitting on this matter, because she wasn't treated very respectfully by Hamza at all, was she?
No. But what I do think is Alex Salmond is having quite a big say on this, and I think if he says, I want you to vote, we don't want to bring an election, we don't want to bring the government down, because it's, you know, it's still the SNP and it's meant to be about independence. So, but I do think they're playing the game, the political game, the letter that they've showed everybody, you know, this letter that they sent, and they've published it for everybody to see, where she wants this and she wants that. And what she wants is actually quite a realistic list. She's not said, I want a referendum right now and all this. She's asked about, she said about the going back to good governance, which in the end of the day, we all want good governance, whatever that means.
Indeed.
And to get rid of the gender policies that they've been coming out with, which everybody wants to get rid of these gender policies that they've come out with. So I can imagine they've got together, and Alex Salmond has said, well, let's make a list of what we want. We'll show it to them. We'll give it to them. We'll give it to the press. We'll put it on Twitter. We'll get it all out there, and let's use it as a
bargaining chip.
Because he's weak.
He is weak.
So you can basically ask for whatever you want because he's weak.
Exactly. And if as I tweeted last night, if I were in Alex Salmond's shoes at this moment, putting the letter together is great. And let's not forget, this is an Ash Regan initiative, ostensibly at least, because she's the one writing the letter. She's the one in Holyrood, not Salmond. But we all know that Salmond's at least guiding her. We know that. Now, Salmond, let's not forget, has about 5 months ago, announced his intention to sue the Scottish government because of its handling of the harassment case against him. And he's actually named people such as senior people like Sturgeon, like Murrow, and he's got that case ongoing. I would reckon behind the scenes, there's been a phone call. Oh, Mark's had to go and look after his doggy, I think. I reckon behind the scenes, there's been maybe some lobbying to say, hey, listen, Hamza, you want any chance of my lady voting for you, you get your finger out and make sure this thing goes through. And I don't ever want to hear the names Murrow or Sturgeon again in connection with the SNP. You've got to make it clear to both of them they're finished with the party. Because right now, Salmond could say whatever he wants. If Humza wants to keep his job, he could tell him to tap dance naked in public and he would probably do it. So, you know, really, this is the dream scenario for Alex Salmond. He is now back in control of the destiny of the SNP government and the future of the SNP First Minister, and he will be relishing every single second of it, I guarantee it.
So where do we go from here, David? What's the scenario of the coming week? Because I believe it's Tuesday. I was told it was going to be Tuesday that the vote, but now I'm told that the process will start, you know, it'll be put in on Tuesday and it'll be Wednesday possibly when...
That's my understanding also. Apparently they don't do very much work on Fridays and Mondays at Holyrood. Nice work if you can get it, you know, right. But so they'll commence the procedure on Tuesday. It may be held Wednesday, it may be held Thursday. I would suspect it's probably going to be Thursday afternoon. I think there'll be a lot of lobbying. I don't know if you saw many of the interviews with Humza today. He's going to write to all the party leaders, inviting them to work with him to make sure this minority government works. So he's trying to put a brave face on. He's trying to show that he's being constructive and trying to make it all happen. He's also saying he's going to reach out to the Greens, but who knows? Maybe the Greens, they're so flighty, particularly Lorna. I mean, she could decide anything. Yesterday, she hated the sight of Hamza, and she'd been betrayed, and it was the biggest act of betrayal in Scottish political history and all this stuff. But today she's softening a little bit, apparently. So who knows? Really, they could do anything.
From what I've been told, the Greens, well, Ross Greer said last night on the BBC that not only wants to bring Humza down, he wants to bring the government down, and he wants an election. Now, I've heard from there was another Green, I can't remember the name, but they've come out today and said that they would vote for giving Humza a bloody nose, but they will not vote against the government because they do not want to bring the government down.
Yeah, I can believe that. If you look at the parties who might want to bring the government down, Paul Hutchin of the Daily Record said today, oh yeah, the Greens will win more seats if it goes to an election. I don't think they will at all, because the reason the Greens have got as many seats as they currently do is because, I'm sure I've said this in your show before, I've certainly said it in the majority, the Greens got about 180,000 votes on the list at the last election, which got them 8 seats, whereas by comparison, the SNP get 1 million votes on the list, which got them 2 seats because of the number of constituency seats they won, and then you're then handicapped on the list. The SNP won't win anything like that number of constituency seats this year, so that means the SNP will be far more reliant on getting their MSPs elected via the list. So the Greens won't win more seats at all. That's certainly not a given. Unless they increase their vote share exponentially, they will not get more seats at all. So I don't think it really does suit the Greens. I think the party which is suited by a swift move to an election is the Labour Party, which is probably why they've done what they've done. The SNP will lose seats, we know that. The Conservatives will lose vote share and almost certainly seats in the list. But of course, this goes back to what my constant frustration with the electoral system in Holyrood. The main parties don't really try to win constituency seats. They genuinely don't. Liberal Democrats didn't win any last time. I beg your pardon, they won 4 last time, didn't win any in the list, but they won seats only because people helped them out with tactical voting. And I think Labour got, was it 5, and the Conservatives, I can't remember the numbers, but it's not a lot of seats anyway. And that's where it falls down, because that enabled the SNP to win, 62 seats, 62 out of 73. So really, guys, that's what you've got to focus on, not sneaking your MSPs in via the list. And that's where it goes wrong. So, but that number for the SNP will fall, but practically all of those seats that they lose will go to Labour, practically all of them. Liberal Democrats might win 1 more, and the Conservatives, it's possible, can hold on to the numbers they've got. So what that means is it won't really suit anybody other than Labour for a swift election. So I suspect and I think the Greens understand that more than the Daily Record's political editor does, seemingly. So I don't think the Greens would necessarily, all of them, want to see an immediate election, and I certainly don't see why the Conservatives would. What the Conservatives don't want to do is lose heavily in the council elections in England, lose heavily in the Westminster election, as they will do almost certainly, and also lose a lot of seats in Holyrood. That's just going to be the most disastrous year in their recent history. So yeah, it's really only Labour, I feel, who will benefit, possibly the Lib Dems as well, who will benefit to a lesser extent from an immediate Holyrood election.
Yeah, so I don't see him bringing down the government, but Humza's finished, though, isn't he?
His credibility's gone. The truth about Humza, we've all said it for weeks. He's not very good. He might be, as John Curtis has said, yes, he's a likable chap. He's certainly intellectually able, but he isn't politically. I can't remember the word he used, but
savvy. He's not
exactly.
savvy. Yeah.
You can see he doesn't have political instinct. He lurches from one howler of a mistake to the next, practically on a daily basis. Nobody else, no other party leader that I've ever encountered would say that he is in a coalition which is worth its weight in gold on the Tuesday, and 48 hours later, unilaterally, without any preamble, end it. I mean, why would you do that? And then come out and say, yes, I just felt it had served its time. It served its time in those last 2 days. Yeah, right, okay. It's just rubbish. The man talks nonsense constantly. And he had also said in an interview when he was talking about the Butte House Agreement, he said, oh, I think a minority government would be a disaster. And now he's saying, well, I want to make this minority government work, and it's my decision. Mate, seriously, you're just embarrassing yourself with this rubbish. It's so obvious that he is a victim of events. He's not in charge of events at all. events are happening to him, and he's trying desperately to react to them without making himself look too weak, and he's failing because he just isn't. He's not the right man for the job. He never was. He's not really a politician. He just says what he feels. There's a little bit of emotion in there. You can see there's a bit of anger in there quite often. That's not what politicians do. Politicians can put on the smile and the long gaze and stuff, and they can say scripted lines or even unscripted lines and never miss a beat. Sturgeon was great at it. Salmond also. They would never deviate from the party line, apart from towards the end when Sturgeon she was starting to lose her temper as well, like he's doing. So he isn't going to last as First Minister. That's obvious. He said today bullishly that he will lead the party into the general election and into the next Holyrood election. I bet he doesn't. He might lead them into the general election.
That's beyond the general election. It's interesting that, because even today, he stood there and he said, "I'm getting on with a job, and they're playing political games." Well, politics is a political game. It's always been a political game.
Yeah.
But he even got called out on it because he said, I'm not playing them games. I'm getting on with a job. We're giving, I think it was 14 or 18 million pounds for housing.
I think it's 80, to be honest.
Was it 80?
I think it's 80. A lot of money. I believe so.
But the interviewer said to him, yes, but that's money that you took off the housing budget in the first place. You dropped the housing budget, and now you're just giving that money back. Exactly. And Humza's face looked as if to say, well, and he went, but we're giving it to the housing. And he couldn't answer. And it was obvious what he's done.
Yeah.
They sat down last night and they'd had a meeting and they said, how do we get out of this? Right, we have to announce a policy. Yeah. What policy can we give? Well, we took all this money off the housing 2 weeks ago. Let's just give that back and make it a big policy. And that's all they've done.
Yeah.
But it's not good politics, because it was so obvious to everybody that's what he's done.
Yes.
Even the press were calling him out on it, and he couldn't answer.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Not answer.
Yeah, that's him. He is lacking. He isn't as adroit at answering questions quickly. His face does give it away. He could never be a poker player because you can see his expression. You can see what he's feeling, and he's got that angry look, that slightly hurt look, that almost disbelieving, slight withdrawal of the head look. He's terrible at interviews, and he talks contradictory rubbish, and he can't come up with policy decisions which are made out of sensible discussion. All he does is come up with headline grabbing stunts like the council tax freeze. You know that as soon as he announced that, everybody in the party went, oh God, no, we're going to have council screaming at us now that we're not giving them enough money. They're going to have to lay people off and close down services. And he's heralding it, trumpeting it like it's some wonderful achievement, freezing council tax. All that's doing is making council jobs impossible. So he just hasn't got it at all on any level. I'm told he doesn't take advice very often.
I was just going to mention that. I was just going to say, where's that media machine we saw under Sturgeon? Exactly. What we saw last night, and the reports and the counter reports, and then the National coming out saying it, and you know, all journalists. Where's that media machine that would never have happened under Sturgeon? That we would never have seen that last night under Sturgeon.
That's true. That's absolutely right. Sturgeon always looked the part. She always had the power suit on and the clickety-clackety high heels. She always looked absolutely on top of her brief. Hair was always perfect. She looked the part. And that's very important in PR, apparently. And this is why I've said often, the SNP is not really a political party. It's a PR company, really. That's all it was about, making this person look good and sound good. That's it. There's no substance to it at all. So much so that whenever Sturgeon came under pressure on one particular policy in particular, which was GRR, she couldn't answer it. And she had a bit of a giggle and then started accusing all her detractors of being racist, homophobic, misogynist, etc., etc. And then she gave up. She just stopped. Why did you give up? Well, you know, I thought I'd just been doing it long enough. Much like Hamza with the Boot House Agreement. No reason at all. Just like, I just felt it was time. You just think, oh my God, this is pathetic. So she was right on top of the PR machinery, and it worked for her perfectly. Hamza's never had that. And if you look at his number 2, he's got Shona Robinson. Shona Robinson gives the impression that she struggles to dress herself in the morning. Let's be honest. I mean, the woman is clearly not fit to be a minister in the Scottish Parliament. She is dreadful, absolutely laughably bad. And that's his number 2. And you look at his cabinet, he's got those others like Mary McCallan, Neil Gray now, who's like 38. He just seems to have come from nowhere at all. There isn't anybody there you would think, oh, there's somebody. Angela Constance is another one. There's no one there you could say, well, there's a real good sounding board. There's somebody who's going to be giving him sage advice. There's somebody who's going to make sure he doesn't take a misstep. And he doesn't have a Liz Lloyd either. Liz Lloyd has been wheeled out on Newsnight last night to say what Humza should do next. How did that come about? You know, who asked her all of a sudden, you know? So very, very strange. It's strange that he doesn't seem to have the backing of the party from the old days, which is very odd considering he was the continuation candidate. Very strange indeed. Why would the continuation candidate not be given a continuation of the same support network that his predecessor enjoyed? Very strange.
Yeah, it shows you a lack of leadership.
Yeah, lack of faith in him as well. I think people know. I mean, it's as obvious as a nose in your face that he's not going to last. He's not going to succeed. Certainly not. I mean, Salmond got the SNP close-ish to winning a referendum. Failed, stepped down. Sturgeon then got them to unprecedented heights in terms of numbers of seats won certainly in the Westminster elections, and then it started to fade, and it's going to fade even more now. So I think you saw peak nationalism under Salmond, then again under Sturgeon, and now the parabola is taking them back down again. Humza is the guy who, in football terms, like the guy who succeeded either Matt Busby or Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. They had an impossible job. They could never live up to him. It was always going to get worse, and that's what Humza's done. It's got a lot worse. I think people just didn't think it would get quite as bad as this so quickly, and it's clearly going to get worse because there's nothing that's happened in the last 2 or 3 days that's made anybody on the planet think, hey, that Humza Yousaf's a steady guy. Yeah, he's somebody who could really advance the cause of independence. Yeah, I think I'll put my back in the SNP now under Humza. Nobody's thinking that because the guy's just a disaster. So yeah, and you know, we keep saying, oh, let's maybe be careful what we wish for because we might get Kate Forbes and she's quite competent, blah 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 blah. I don't know so much. We saw her lack of political judgment when she came out saying a year ago, well, I don't really believe in sex outside marriage. What? Sex? I don't think.
I don't rate Kate Forbes, but as a politician anyway. But I personally don't think she's going to go anywhere near this race because of the way she was treated by the party.
Yeah, I think that's possibly true. Yeah, indeed. And of course, she'll know that the makeup of the SNP support these days, let's just say, would not immediately welcome a female, white, heterosexual, Church of Scotland almost sect member, which she is. She's in the Free Church of Scotland. So how many of the SNP's latter-day core support would welcome somebody with that from that demographic and from those groups? I would suggest comparatively few. And she's not going to want to be in there to hear anything by way of criticism about any of those categories into which she falls. So no, I think it is very unlikely. I think it's more likely, I've always felt it's more likely that Mary McCallan is the anointed successor. And as I did say yesterday, maybe if Humza steps down now, then she could get in and get the job before she takes her maternity leave. So who knows? It's hard to say. Hard to see where they're going to go. Anything could happen next week. You know, this is why I hope Murdo doesn't make any more predictions tonight because he's wasting his time. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the next few days.
So we come to. I personally think he'll limp on until the general election, and then when they lose heavily at the general election, I think he'll the party will force him out. Yeah, that's what I think is gonna happen, and I think it's maybe best for us that he does limp on to the general election because he's not going to. I don't think he's going to get any of his policies through from now to the general election anyway.
Well, and indeed, it's going to be very difficult because in order for him to placate the Greens, he's going to have to annoy some of his own MSPs like Kate Forbes and like Fergus Ewing. So there's a trade-off there. What they'll probably do, of course, is just abstain, and he might be able to get some stuff through, but it's going to be very difficult. You will pretty much, it seems that Labour don't mind voting with Conservatives to bring him down. That's what it seems like anyway, or to stymie his policies latterly. Of course, they made the big mistake of taking the different view when it was the GRR and the hate crimes bill, but they seem to have come to their senses a little bit on that now. So it will be difficult. He's either going to have to rely on his own rebellious backbenchers or the Green Party, neither one of which groups is particularly enamoured with him right now. So it will be very difficult for him. And if it as somebody said today, if it reaches the stage that he keeps bringing policies on bills through which just can't pass, like Theresa May, then eventually he'll just say, "Oh, look, I've had enough of this. Come on, let's just have
that could well bring the government down on its own, because if the government can't act or can't do anything, then it's a lame parliament, isn't it?
It's not worthy of the name. It's like a pub with no beer. There's just no point at all. So yeah, I think there's we know that he's not going to re-energize the party. He's not going to revive the party's electoral fortunes. So from that point of view, as far as I'm concerned, like you, I'm delighted that he's staying. We're only concerned about what more damage he might wreak on Scotland in the meantime by gifts to shady-looking Middle Eastern organisations, shall we say, as he's been prone to do allegedly. So, and luckily, it doesn't seem like he'll be able to get any more of his crazy legislation through, because he would struggle to get everybody lined up to vote for anything that he produced. So, yeah, hopefully there isn't much more damage he can do in the short term, all being well.
The last question for we'll end is a quick one. Is, do you think there'll be a Holyrood election within the next 12 months?
I think he will. I think the events of next week will not prompt a Holyrood election. I don't think that the Labour vote of no confidence in the government will win. It won't succeed. So I don't think there is going to be an immediate Holyrood election. I don't think I don't think that there will be a Holyrood election before the general election. Certainly not. The general election has to take place by December/January. It could be January. It won't be. It'll be October probably at the latest. 6 months. Will there be a Holyrood election a further 6 months away? I doubt it. It's possible there might be one in just over a year, but not within a year, would be my opinion. Because May 2025 would be 4 years since the last election. By that stage, by the time May 25 comes around, or say April comes around, because you'd have to call an election before you hold it, in 12 months' time, there should be a Labour government should have been in place for 6 months in Westminster. It's almost certain that the Labour representation in Scotland will be the highest party, and there'll be more than the SNP. So the SNP figures will be annoyed. Alba will be screaming for an immediate election so that we can get back to a drive for independence and all this nonsense. Greens will be saying whatever the hell they think. So yeah, I think the reason I say all that is it's probable that some of the pro-independence parties might be quite keen on the idea of an election. Now remember, you need a 2/3 majority to get an election. You could probably just about get that. Yeah, I think with Labour would probably go for it. So yeah, I would say, I hope this isn't too much of a fudge. I don't think there'll be a Holyrood election within the next 12 months, but possibly shortly after that there might be. I think any time from May 25 onwards could be any time at all, I would have thought.
Thank you, David. I hope we've gone through it and made a little bit more sense of what's happened in the last 48 hours. Because
exactly.
While we've been talking, it could be completely different.
Yeah, exactly. By the time this airs, who knows what's going to have happened? So no, it's brilliant to have the opportunity to discuss these things, and hopefully it has helped understanding for some people. But it's an amazing time. It's a very exciting time. It's lovely watching a crowd of no-hopers finally being shown up for exactly what they are, and that's incompetent and out of time. So thank goodness.
Yeah, no problem. And I'm no doubt at all on Wednesday you'll be discussing this. It might come up on the majority show, but
I suspect you're right there, Mark, with you're showing amazing prescience there. But yes, I think you're absolutely right. So it should be an interesting show indeed. Yeah.
Yes. So please go on Wednesday, majority show, 7 p.m. Tune in. It's a great show to watch. So thank you, David. And well, I hope we've gone through it with you, and it's made a little bit more sense of it. So that's us for today, and thank you for watching. I hope please thumbs up, always thumbs up, share and subscribe to the channel so I can get as big a reach as possible. So thank you for listening, and till next time, take care.
Bye guys, thanks very much. Cheers, Mark.